In the heart of the city, where the lines between wealth and poverty were drawn sharper than ever, a little girl wandered barefoot through the streets. Her name was Maya. She was no stranger to hunger, no stranger to cold nights on sidewalks, and no stranger to people walking past her as if she didn't exist. But what made Maya different was not her poverty, but her belief in something most adults had long abandoned: miracles. Every day, she scavenged through garbage bins, collecting scraps of food. A half-eaten sandwich, a bruised apple, a crust of bread, things others had thrown away became her survival. Yet, in her heart, she always whispered, "Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow, a miracle will come." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline and painted the sky a dull orange, Maya overheard people talking outside a bakery. They were speaking of a man, once a powerful millionaire, now paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. His name was Mr. Donovan. Years ago, an accident had stolen not just his ability to walk, but also his will to live. Despite all his riches, his mansion had become his prison, his smile erased, his heart hardened. People said he didn't believe in happiness anymore, that he mocked prayers, dismissed kindness, and lived only in bitterness. To Maya, however, that sounded like someone who desperately needed a miracle. That night, as she held her small sack of leftovers, Maya whispered to herself, maybe he's the one who needs a miracle more than me. And maybe, just maybe, I can trade my food for his hope. The next morning, determined and trembling, Maya made her way to the grand mansion. The gates alone were taller than any building she had ever known. The guards stared at her ragged clothes, her messy hair, and the bag clutched in her hands. One of them laughed, "Little girl, you don't belong here." But Maya didn't back away. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "Please, let me see him. I want to make a trade. I want to give him something." The guards exchanged puzzled looks. Something in her eyes, a quiet strength beyond her years, made them hesitate. Against their instincts, they let her in. Inside the mansion, silence loomed like a heavy fog. Marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled, but none of it mattered. For at the far end of the room, sitting in a wheelchair with his back turned to the world, was Mr. Donovan. He didn't move when the little footsteps echoed through the hall. He didn't speak when Maya stood before him. Finally, in a voice almost too soft to hear, Maya said, "Sir, I've come to make a trade." He turned slowly, his eyes tired, his face marked with the lines of years of anger and sorrow. "A trade," he said bitterly. "Little girl, I have nothing to give you. Whatever you're selling, you're wasting your time." But Maya shook her head and held up her small, torn bag. "I'm not selling. I'm offering. These are my leftovers." She opened the bag, showing scraps of bread and pieces of fruit she had gathered from the trash. "They're all I have, but I want to trade them for a miracle." For the first time in years, Mr. Donovan laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that echoed in the cold room. "A miracle? Do you even know what you're saying? I've spent millions on doctors, treatments, therapies. None of it worked. And you think your garbage food can buy me a miracle?" Maya's little hands trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "Yes. Because miracles don't come from money. They come from belief. If you take my food, you'll take my hope with it. That's the trade." His laughter faltered. He stared at her, confused and shaken. For years, no one had dared speak to him this way. No one had offered him anything without expecting something in return. Yet here was this hungry child, giving up the only food she had, for him. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you give me your food when you have nothing?" Maya stepped closer, placing her small hand gently on his arm. "Because maybe, if you believe again, you'll find your miracle. And maybe, if you find yours, you'll help me find mine." The room went silent. For the first time in years, Mr. Donovan felt something stir inside him. Not pity, not anger, but hope. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying her words. A poor little girl with nothing but scraps had given him more than all his wealth ever could, a reason to try again. The next morning, he made a decision. He reached out to a doctor he had long ignored, a specialist who had offered him a therapy program he had dismissed as hopeless. This time, he said yes. The journey was grueling. Weeks of pain, months of frustration. There were days he wanted to quit, but every time he remembered Maya's small hand and her voice saying, "If you believe again, you'll find your miracle." And then, one morning, it happened. A twitch. A spark of movement in his legs. Doctors couldn't believe it. Progress that seemed impossible was now real. Step by step, against all odds, Mr. Donovan began to walk again. News spread quickly. Reporters filled his mansion, asking what miracle had brought him back. With cameras flashing, Mr. Donovan simply said, "It wasn't money. It wasn't doctors. It was a little girl who traded me her leftovers for hope. She gave me a miracle I didn't believe in anymore." But the story didn't end there. Mr. Donovan knew he had to find her, the little girl who had changed his life. For weeks, he searched the city. And one cold evening, he found her. Curled up in an alley, shivering, clutching an empty bag. He approached her slowly, and when she looked up, her eyes widened. You're standing," she whispered. Tears filled his eyes as he knelt before her. "Yes, because of you." He pulled her into his arms and said, "Now it's my turn to give you a miracle." From that day forward, Maya was no longer the poor little girl wandering the streets. She became part of his family, cherished and loved. She went to school, had warm meals, and slept in a bed for the first time in her life. And every time people asked Mr. Donovan what the greatest investment of his life was, he would smile and say, "A bag of leftovers. Because in those scraps, I found the greatest treasure, faith, kindness, and a miracle." And Maya, she never stopped believing. Because now, she knew miracles didn't just happen. Sometimes, you had to be brave enough to trade what little you had, for something greater than you ever imagined.